Welcome back to another episode of Life in Focus. I'm your host, Ben Tate, and today I'm joined by Austin Rodriguez. Austin is the head of production here at Coaster Creative, which is an all-inclusive production company based in St. Petersburg, Florida, where we're filming this podcast right now. He is also an aspiring writer. So in today's episode, we'll talk about his creative process, his inspiration and goals on the writing side of things, as well as how he balances his time between building a creative juggernaut here with the Coaster Creative team, as well as finding time to, draft his own narrative. So with that said, Austin, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast, man.
Yeah, man, dude, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, dude.
Absolutely. So I know a little bit about you. I don't know if the viewers how much they know about you, but how'd you, I guess let's just start with how you, made it to St. Pete. I know you're from the Tampa Bay area, but what brought you to Coaster Creative and in this area?
Yeah, I grew up in Tampa, went to Florida State, and then after that, I pursued an MFA in screenwriting up in New York. Then I moved to LA for a little bit. Wasn't my town. I think California's great.
Yeah.
LA is just like not my city.
Did you go to LA after college? Or
I went to, so the MFA program was like a 2-part system. They were like, you can either do all the years in LA or you can switch it up and do New York and LA. And my dad is from New York, and he was like, go see that city.
Yeah.
He was like, go see it. So, and I went there and I love New York. It was so fun. It's a great town. And then obviously I had to go to the final program year over in LA. And then got done with that. And I was working in a restaurant and did some internships and all that stuff. And then I was like, man. And I called a buddy of mine, and he was like, I told him, I was like, hey, do you have anything back in New York? And he was like, actually, we have this one thing that like just opened up, and we need this position. It was for like a show for ABC. And I talked to the manager, Chloe. She was awesome. And she was like, hey, we need this position to be filled like right now. Frank, shout out to Frank if you're watching this. Frank was like, she was like, we really like you from what Frank said. How fast can you get here? And I think it was like a Wednesday. And I was like, when do you need it by? And they were like, Monday. So I had like a quick conversation with my roommate, and I was like, hey, I think I'm gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
So packed up everything.
He's like, you got rent or what?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I was like, I'll help you with everything until like because I think it was August, and I think it was like 3 more months on it. So I was like, hey, I'll help you with it from afar.
Sure.
And got on a plane, went back to New York, started working there, and then COVID happened, and then came back here, and it was 2 weeks, and initially to stop everything, and then it turned into what we all know,
right.
And then I was like, I don't think I'm going back, so I went up. Me and my mom, we packed up my whole apartment in a van, and we drove all the way down.
Jeez.
And I think like a day after I got back to Tampa, my boss was like, hey, we're back. Are you coming? And I was like,
what?
Shit. So
wait, what month? What month was this?
This was October now
Of 2020?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is October.
So this is like when they thought maybe COVID's like behind us.
So then
that little break we had.
Yeah. And I went back to the city at that time, and it was like very I Am Legend-esque.
Yeah.
And stuck it out for I think 4 or 5 more months, and then admittedly just kind of depression got to me, and I was like, I think I'm gonna go back home. So then came back to Tampa, didn't really know what I was gonna do, and then came in here for a video editing position. I didn't know shit about video editing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I knew some of it. I think the basics of it. I wouldn't call myself an editor.
Yeah.
And then Zach, the gentleman behind the camera, owner of Coastal, he was like, cool, you're on. Let's see what's up. And then did a couple of video editing jobs. And then I think Zach quickly found out that I wasn't the greatest editor.
He's like, all right.
Yeah. But he was also like, and I don't know if I'm speaking for you, Zach, but he was like, you're probably not the best editor. There's other things, you can be doing. What are we going to get into? And then kind of folded into this producing role. So that's how I kind of made my way to St. Pete.
Gotcha.
So
so when you were in college, I guess when you were in college, you kind of got your feet wet with some of this stuff. How much stuff were you able to kind of try out with some of the courses and assignments that you did on the production, writing, editing side of things? Was it just very introductory, beginner level to see if there was interest, or was it just kind of all intertwined in the curriculum, or kind of how was that?
Sure. I know that the program was really focused on the writing, which is what was, what I went to go for, which is great. And, you do all the thesis, and they do writing exercises. I can't really remember some of them off the top of my head. But if you do a master class, they're all there. You can really just find out anything. The benefit that I got from going to an actual program in a school, I think it's really what you make of it.
Yeah.
Because being in, those dorms and everything with all those different people who were doing different department courses, they were like, oh, I can do this thing. And then you find out and like collaborate. So it really is what you make of it.
Sure.
Because you can find writing courses online and you don't need to do that.
Right.
But if you're going to do that, I think that was a really cool thing of me getting my feet wet with just being around the people that were also trying to be in this industry but do something different with it.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't have I never thought producing would be like something that I would fall into.
Sure.
I was very like, I'm just going to write.
Be a writer, yeah.
And then you realize that like there's not that many paths with writing.
Sure.
You got to like work your way towards that. And then producing kind of came naturally with just meeting people and stuff like that. And then editing was, they had like an editing course. They had like basics of like setting up a camera course.
Yeah.
And they made us do an acting class as well. Because they were like, if you're going to write, like you need to know
what you're writing for.
Yeah, they were like, you need to know what you're writing for and how like actors perceive it, which was cool and like very cool stuff. So I think they gave you the basics in that course too. But it was very heavy, like screenwriting and just trying to write a thesis and stuff like that. So
Gotcha. It's funny because in college courses, a lot of times, depending on the class, there's like group assignments and stuff. But like, how does that work with writing? Because I feel like writing's so personal that like it's probably even tough it's kind of like poli-sci. It's like as long as you have an argument, like who am I as a teacher or professor to say you're wrong or right? As long as there's effort and some level. So like obviously I know writing's a little bit different because they can say, hey, like this context of writing won't work for this assignment. But how was there group assignments and how do those work when they have multiple brains trying to write something?
So I know for like the actual MFA program that I did, they made us do like a TV writing room.
Okay.
And that was cool. Yeah, cool. It was, and they, I forget how they did it, but it was something like you had to like pitch the idea.
Gotcha.
And then the group decided like, okay, this was like the idea we were going to go with.
Gotcha.
And
then everyone's kind of on the same.
Yeah.
thing.
And then if your idea got picked, then you were like the EP.
Gotcha.
Which was like, low stakes. We're all like students. So like, then you were kind of like the person that made the decisions, but like not really because you had a teacher with you, an instructor on it. So for that kind of setting, sure, that was kind of like a collaborative group effort thing. But it's funny when you say like, how does that work? Well, you get a lot of different ideas, and you have to like, especially for something where it's not a group effort thing, because it was like, all right, come in with pages and like yours up to read, and we're gonna read your stuff, and then we're gonna give you notes. And I remember like one of the first times I did it was at Florida State, and I took a writing course, and I wrote like a 10-page like cowboy story. And dude, I think for like an hour and 30 minutes, everyone just like laid into me.
Gosh.
They just kicked me in my nuts. And which was cool because then you really go, oh shit, I got to work on stuff.
A lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I remember like I was like so down about it. And
what was like the biggest thing that was like the general theme of like the criticism? Was it just like
my character was flat and they didn't care about him, and I was like, damn, he's got like 9 more pages.
Yeah,
so,
you're like, what? This is the guy.
I mean,
he's on the cover.
Yeah, so it was like that, and then they told me that the plot was good, like the idea was good, but just everything else just crumbled. And like that's a big thing.
Sure.
Like you have to have like a lot of building blocks
to
make there's a lot of formulas to it, and they all have to have some sort of significance or stability to it. So that was like it was like my first one that I turned in. I was like, this is good. And it's great because you think oh, this is awesome. You love your own stuff,
good to get feedback too,
And then when someone's like, this sucks. And then I think in my tenure as a writer, you want that. You want people to be. When I first happened, I did not want it. I was like, oh no. I thought people were going to love this. And then you realize, no, sometimes your shit is not good.
Sure.
And so it's better when you pass something off to somebody. And for me, I never want someone to be like, this is amazing. This is great. You're so great. That's like you handing something over to like your grandparents.
True.
And they're like, of course, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But it's better when someone's like, this is terrible.
Especially if they know how to peer review.
Yeah.
Because like you said, your grandparents don't really know how to peer review.
Yeah.
They're just like, this is great effort, cool story.
Yeah, they're like, I loved it.
But like, obviously your peers
sick.
are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But Misery Loves Company, so you're probably like, all right, who are we reviewing next?
Yeah.
I got some notes.
I think I was the last one. So so I was like, I can't wait for the next one now. So
That's so funny.
But yeah, and another thing too is like, I think and you might have a question for lined up, but another good thing for getting peer review is like you're so close to something, you don't know what it needs.
Sure.
Because you have your own ideas and your own vision, and when you start writing that down, you're like, this is great, this is great, this is great. And then it's better when someone's like, I don't understand this, which is amazing from like an audience perspective. Because like, I don't get why this is happening.
Sure.
Have you thought of this? And then you go, oh, I've never thought of that. So it's great to get that feedback as well.
This is probably a horrible analogy, but sometimes if you're typing a quick email, you're texting really quick, and you like forget like a word or two because it's in your brain when you're saying the thing.
Yes.
But it's just like a small word, like you're missing like you or and or this or whatever. It's just like so like from a writing perspective, do you think that happens where you almost forget to like write down thoughts that were in your head when you had the thought that you already did write down?
100%, because you're dealing with so many different like storylines and plot lines and character development. There's so many things in this bag. And you have them all up here, sure. And of course, when you're especially in like a first draft, you're just trying to get stuff out,
just like brainstorming it out.
And then you look at it and you're like, oh, I missed this. But a cool thing that I was taught, and they were like, even if like you're on page 45 and you have like 45 to go, if you thought of something back that should be on like page 15, just keep going. Keep going and you'll get back to it. So sometimes you do have that moment where you're like, oh, I'm already getting to like the third act of the story. I meant to put this here to set it up. Or you discover something that you're like, oh, this would be better if I put this here. Just keep going. And because you have to go through like so many rounds of revisions and stuff like that.
It's like those movies when you go back and change one thing in time and it changes everything.
Oh, it's a massive butterfly effect. Because then you have to go through every single page and be like, does this add up? And then
I gotta add Tony over here.
Yeah,
oh, this is Tony's wife. Okay.
Like you, and then you. It's so true. Like you'll see things like that where you're like, I need something for this character, and you're like, I'm gonna write him a dog or anything. So you're like, now I gotta make sure this fucking dog gets all the way to the end. So, yeah,
man, that would be tough. So do you think that, is there any kind of intersection between some of the production work you're doing here and how you approach like your writing? I guess from the standpoint of, you work with a lot of different, entertainers, artists, creatives, you know what I'm saying? So do you either pull from how they prepare to do a certain thing that you're producing, or I don't know, or is it just completely different on how you approach kind of your creative side of things?
No, I think they definitely intersect, especially with like creatives and especially clients who like have a business or they like need something for marketing or something like that. I think one of the bigger takeaways that, because when you're doing an intensive like writing program, it's sky's the limit. Like they want you to have high concepts and like, because you can do everything. It's free. Like, and this is just to get a grade. You know what I mean? But when you get into like stepping into producing and like things matter, you find out how much words cost, literally. Sure. And like there's like a 7-word sentence in like a script that like will cost you a couple grand. That's and crazy. You're like, okay. And then you have to like go back. It's a lot of logistics and then creative as well. Yeah. And budgeting, and then also kind of negotiating, because then there's sometimes where people have like a really high vision and maybe they don't have the money or the budget's not there for it. So you're like, okay, how do we get you to have your cake and eat it too? Right. Save your money, save, the company's money, save your own personal budgets. In whatever line of work you're producing, whether it's like freelance, working for someone else or anything like that. So you really have to find a balance there, I would say. So that's been really helpful as a writer, especially coming out of college. Sure. When you're like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna write crazy. Like I remember one time I wrote something about like poachers, and they were like, "Do you know how much elephants cost?" And I was like, "All right, never mind. I'm sorry." So
no, that's a good point. No, I mean, and too, it's like you said, like I feel like writing in general is general, right? Like, are you writing scripts? Are you writing novels? Are you writing for TV? Are you writing for movies? Obviously, it's a lot different. Yeah. So I think just your experience on the production side of things can, like, even if you're not consciously thinking about it, subconsciously you kind of know where you can take, your writing.
100%.
And again, I know you probably, I guess you could tell us, I guess what is your primary goal on the writing side of things?
I mean, ultimately, it is to write movies, but I think in like recent, years, like very recent, I was like, I might want to try, prose and do, book writing and things like that, because script format is the same for television and movies. Sure. But there's two different beasts of it. You have to
Yeah.
like make sure that you have enough longevity to like run to 10 episodes or whatever it is, and then you have to make sure you have enough for like seasons and stuff
Right.
like that. So because people are like, well, where does this go?
Yeah, do you have like a little bit behind the curtain knowledge on that kind of stuff? Like when we see these, Taylor Sheridan, obviously very popular right now
Yeah.
with Paramount, all the shows that he has with them. Are these just, did he have all these stories in the vault? Does he have a team that he's working with and he's telling them his inspiration? I mean, how is he turning out these
I don't
these
know.
scripts so quick?
Taylor
Is
Sheridan's-
it ChatGPT?
I mean, ChatGPT is probably like a good thing to bounce off ideas. Sure. I don't know, and I can't speak for Mr. Taylor. So,
Yeah.
but he's got something that where he kind of caught fire in his hand with
Yeah.
Yellowstone.
Sure.
And then like it built off of that. 'Cause
Right.
and I think a cool thing that is interesting to think about, and they taught us this a lot, which in the beginning I was like, this is kind of stupid. Because they were like, the idea was when you think of something that has legs, that can go, to a universe, because everything's a universe now.
Right.
Everything is a universe.
Yeah,
Everything is like, well, how do we get this story to show this? People want to know about this character. And I remember they were like trying to set us up for thinking forward like that. Like they were like, J.K. Rowling had like Harry Potter's wands and like she
Yeah.
could sell the wands. So a lot of things are business
Right.
oriented because
I feel like Star Wars started that, arguably.
of 100%.
Yeah.
And that's like a big thing with like how that happened. I think there was like a deal where George Lucas was like, I'm gonna keep the rights to like the toys and stuff like that. So that's a whole nother thing too.
Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but they do because people want that. Fans
Sure.
really want that.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Comic Con's a
kids,
huge thing.
all that.
Yeah, everybody.
The fans
everyone-
want their kids to have it when they
Everyone
have
wants
kids,
a lightsaber.
you know?
So yeah, I remember they were like trying to coach us into like when you're writing your
so
story.
funny.
They were like
Yeah.
when you're writing your story, think of like things that like if you meet like a
Yeah.
executive producer who wants to buy this. What's something that's gonna like be intriguing to them?
Yeah.
And for example, it's like, well, I could sell a bunch of Harry Potter wands to
Right.
kids, and they're like, all right,
Yeah.
They're like, that's good.
You're onto
They're
something.
like,
The
yeah,
wands,
yeah.
like you said, the lightsabers is almost the same thing. With
And then action
Yellowstone,
figures.
it's
Oh, yeah.
like the Dutton Ranch symbol.
Oh,
and
it's all the
apparel.
merch. Everybody's
Yeah.
got a Dutton Ranch hat and stuff like that. But in terms of like his ideas, I think he found a really good niche with like westerns.
Yeah.
Because then he did 1888,
Yeah.
and then 1912 or 23,
Yeah.
and then also went to
He has that one with he
Billy
has a bunch
Bob
of them.
Thornton,
Yeah, Billy
he
Bob
had
Thornton.
Landman,
yeah,
and then he
Landman,
also
yeah.
did like Lawman Bass Reeves.
Yeah, that was really good.
And he's also got like a crazy deal where like he has this like back lot like at his
Yeah.
house at 4-6's Ranch,
Yeah.
and he
which he
just-
bought with the Yellowstone
Yeah,
money.
and like
and then rented it back to Yellowstone for filming, which
yeah,
is crazy.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
So he really was in like the right place, right time, had all the
Yeah.
credentials ready,
Yeah.
and then was like, I'm just gonna start making like a Disney Wonderland of
Yeah.
like westerns, whether it be like current or
Sure.
past. So
I think his story is cool too because he started off as just like an extra actor.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he I think he was more than an extra on a few things, but he basically couldn't crack into being consistently casted,
Yeah.
getting jobs was what it seemed like. Plenty of producers and directors said, "Hey, you're not gonna be that guy." And obviously, in a lot of the shows that he writes, he puts himself in as an actor.
Yeah.
And funny enough, he also does the Lioness show,
oh yeah.
and it's funny because he makes himself as like 10th on the call sheet, like he's just like an extra as part of the army,
Yeah.
like one of the SEAL guys. I mean, he makes himself a badass on there
For sure.
But it's just funny because in the season finale of the most latest season, again, he's like a nobody on that show as a character. But he makes himself in the last episode be like the coolest guy. Like
Like
he's
for Yellowstone or Lioness?
Lioness.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah, he
haven't
makes
seen
himself like he's like a SEAL, and basically they're overpowered by like hundreds of people in the Middle East, and there's like 6 of them, and he's just standing in front of like 50 people, just mowing them down, like the only guy that doesn't have a bullet in him. And I'm like, all right, this is
Yeah,
pretty
man.
cool.
He found his way, man.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's there's a lot of things that like happen like that, like Sylvester Stallone with Rocky,
Yeah.
which just like the whole idea of like MGM was like, listen, this is never gonna happen.
Yeah.
And they're like, we want the rights to Rocky. We're
Sure.
gonna buy it from you. And he was like, I'm being
I'm Rocky.
Rocky.
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
were like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and it paid off. So it's a lot of risks.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
So, but I mean, Taylor Sheridan's kind of the man. He also does like other great stuff. Like what's that one, Wind River
I'm not sure.
with Hawkeye? What's
oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
yeah, it's like him and Elizabeth Olsen.
Yeah.
And it's like great.
Everything
It-
he's done has been pretty
yeah,
good.
they all hit. They
you
all
know?
hit. So
Yeah, he's not an old guy, but not a young. I mean, I feel like we're still gonna get a lot of shows from him
for sure.
Because it seems like the new thing now, even on Netflix, I think Netflix kind of started it, was signing these guys to deals, right? So like Chappelle got signed to like a X amount of special deal. I know
Adam Sandler has
that deal.
Movies. Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. Like, all right, Adam, we need 10 more movies from you, which is seems pretty daunting.
And I'm sure that a lot of those ideas that Adam brings to the table for Netflix, it's weird. There's like a lot of red tape with like big companies like that because they're like, all right, you have like you have a lot of people like hands in the pocket for that. So yeah,
absolutely. So what I guess what are your attainable short-term goals on the writing side of things, right? Like obviously you have a lot of obligations here. You're growing something special here that you're a part of.
Yeah.
And obviously that leads to connections and experience and learning from other people's mistakes that you don't have to, learn yourself, so to speak. But what's, I guess, your short-term goal that's attainable in the next couple of years from whether it's, doesn't have to be something that makes money, but just like something you're holding yourself to, whether it's like, hey, I want to get this much, this many pages completed for a book I'm writing, or I want to complete this script. I want to submit a couple scripts for a peer review. What are some things that you have on your docket?
Yeah, I think short term is just getting out more content, because I think for something like this, it's about one, being in the right place at the right time, meeting somebody. But then when you do meet that, what would be the worst thing to do is to be like, oh yeah, I'm a writer. And then someone's like, all right, well, show me something. And then you're like, I don't have it yet. Yeah. And so like, I definitely want to have a portfolio of written work that is, speaks to an audience, has a good mass appeal. And then, so yeah, I think for right now, and that could change in the next 2 years of getting more scripts and more written work under my belt. And then I think this year for sure, I really want to try and take a crack at writing a novel.
Okay.
So we'll see where that goes. I think long term, I mean, and I've heard that getting agents and stuff doesn't really fix everything. It's just you have someone that represents you, but you kind of still have to be working and putting yourself out there and doing all that stuff. So I think just making enough content, making the right connections is probably my next short-term goal.
Gotcha.
Because that I think in any industry, it's a lot about who you know.
Yeah.
I mean, anything. Yeah. So just finding the right people to open doors for you and stuff like that.
So you mentioned the novel, but do you think that there'd be any benefit to almost having one of each, right? Here's what my novel is, or is it better just to focus on one thing and put your all into it? Because you might enjoy writing novels more, but you might be more talented on the script side of things.
Yeah.
So when somebody does look at your portfolio, hey, I want this, not this, or whatever.
So that's a cool thing and that's why I'm doing the novel, or that's the goal of the novel, that I want to try my hand at it. Because if it doesn't work, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's still good practice.
I can still go back to what I'm used to doing.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to see where that goes. And funny enough, some of my instructors, they were he's like, you think that the one thing that you're really precious about is super, that's the one that's going to get sold. And then people will look at stuff and they'll be like, I don't know about this one. I think it's cool. I think it's a cool idea. You can definitely write. What else do you have? And then they have one that they're like, this thing I wrote 3 years ago. Yeah. I don't really like it, but here. And they're like, that's the one we want. So it's really just you never know when something could hit or when something is going to be.
With anything else in content
creation.
Yeah,
it's you never know when something is going to light someone up and be like, oh, I'm passionate about this. Yeah. So
no, that makes sense. When you were taking some classes and in your experience, is there a certain time period that it takes to create something of value? For instance, in the real estate world, depending on certain, if you're working on valuation reports, right? And some of these valuation reports for these commercial assets could be hundreds of, 100, 200 pages long, right?
Yeah.
A lot of details in it, the cash flows, the finances, the market analysis, all this good stuff. So a lot of people say, hey, you can't really give me an accurate report in under this amount of time. It takes so much due diligence, so much analysis on your end, critical thinking, etc. Yeah. So from the writing perspective, I'm assuming that if you did meet somebody and there was an opportunity, how realistic would it be from a timing perspective? They're like, hey, we have this thing in 2 months. Is that enough time to create a script? Or obviously a novel is different, but from a script perspective, how much ample time would it need? to create that.
I mean, I think it's a case by case thing. I think it just really depends on like what the story is. Like if someone was like, we have a Hallmark movie idea, you could probably knock it out. You could probably at least get a draft and like a revision in 2 months.
Okay.
Something where they'd be like, this is, good enough that we have the bones of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
we
know that the sets aren't really going to change. We know the casting's not going to change. But even then, like I know that when we were working at like the production office in New Jersey, we would get a revised script on things every week.
Oh, wow, okay.
Because as long as like things kind of just stay and like the set pieces aren't changing,
right,
and like the sequences aren't changing dramatically, you can kind of get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they'll be like, hey, we're thinking about this. This isn't really working. Kind of like with producing. It's like, hey, this is great.
Yeah.
It's not what we can do right now. Can we think of something else? So I would say it really just depends on what is being asked and what the task at hand is.
Yeah.
Because I know that like for things that are super high concept, like Hamilton, like that, he had the idea for it in 2008. Didn't have anything really written down. I think he had like a couple songs, and then like I think he had like 3 or 4 songs in 2011.
Okay.
And if you've seen or heard Hamilton, that's like 50 songs.
It's impressive.
And it is. It's
the whole time watching, I'm like, how did he do this?
Yeah, it takes
and
him.
Star in it.
Yeah. Lynn's a G, dude. He is.
And the fact that they were trying to, after it got successful, like everything else, they wanted more money. I'm like, but this is the guy.
Yeah, exactly.
He did everything.
Yeah. So, and then like I think 2015 or 2016 it came out. So that's an 8-year process.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's like Avatar.
Also, the product of 8 years was phenomenal.
Right.
I mean,
so that's why I wondered, because sometimes it seems like even when we, you want certain, second seasons or third season, like, oh, it's going to take 2 years to get that season. Like, Game of Thrones, you're like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah,
you had like 30 writers at HBO.
No. Well, HBO, I mean, the Game of Thrones stuff is super.
That's like a movie, I know.
Yeah, and I understood, like, I guess I understood, like, why it took so long between seasons, because, like, they had a team of writers, and they were like, we need to make sure this, like, gets to where it needs to be when the pilot comes out.
Yeah.
And, we're ready for season 3 or 4. So I get it. And then they did something wild with season 8 and whatever.
Yeah.
So I get it. Time is precious. I think you should take as much time as you should need. But on the double side of that, like I think that if you keep messing with stuff, you'll never let it go.
Right.
So you gotta like be like, all right, this is good enough.
Yeah.
Let's start going with this. And then if it changes, it changes. Yeah. Because then that's like the beauty of having so many people on it.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, all right, here it is. They're like, this is great.
Yeah.
Cool. We like it. Now, what if we did this?
Right.
And then you have so many people putting their own creative marks on it. You have your DPs, you have your directors. So, yeah. I think I said that. I don't know. I summed it up right. I don't know.
Well, that makes a lot of sense too, because, and I'm also thinking now, it's like we're in this world now where it's like people want high quality content, but at the same time, it's almost like they expect it to be high quality.
Yeah.
So it has to be high quality for them to watch it, but they're already expecting it to be high quality. So once it is and they watch it, they're done with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like, do you take the Game of Thrones approach to it, or the Taylor Sheridan approach to it, where his is like, I'm going to emphasize the writing.
Yeah.
The production, we'll have some decent scenes, some decent, whatever. But it's not like Game of Thrones production, right?
Yeah.
It's not like every episode of Yellowstone doesn't feel like it's a movie.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, it did in the last couple seasons. Like, wow, we're watching like a movie every time. Like something that could be in the theater. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean.
So what's like the compromise there, right? It's like, I guess it just depends on what your strong suits are.
It really just comes down to, it comes down to strong suits, but
and
then also
budget too, I guess.
Budget, and then also I think the concept, because like I think and those concept and budget go hand in hand.
Sure.
Like Game of Thrones is a whole different realm than Cowboys in Wyoming or
absolutely.
Montana. So you have to really like lean into this. Like, hey, we're gonna go big. If we're gonna do this, we got to go.
You can't overproduce. Like a joke too. Like if I'm doing an impersonation of somebody, it's not funny if I over impersonate them.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's almost like that with like you said, the Cowboy stuff. It's like you can't overdo what is.
Once you start getting, because like even then there are action films that have like low stakes in terms of like there's no dragons and things like that,
right.
And people will overproduce it, and you're like, this looks a little silly.
Yeah, this is not real.
Yeah, you're
but
like,
with dragons, like we already know it's not real.
Yeah,
so, like
that's the thing.
Yeah,
like,
let's get 10 more dragons.
And like, yeah, exactly. And like I think you get away. It's cool about like learning the unspoken rules of things, because then you can bend it and like work with things.
Sure.
Like when you're dealing with fantasy, none of this is real, so you can kind of make things up.
Yeah.
within reason. But cowboys in Montana, you can really only go so far.
Exactly.
So, and that's great.
Sure.
And then you're focusing really on like character development and storylines and things like that.
Yeah.
I also think that sometimes once you get into like an 8th season of a show,
I know.
you're kind of running out of things to do.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's also good to know when to put things to pasture.
Yeah.
So
Don't tell it to Law and Order. Or,
I would never. They're doing great.
What was the other one too? The hospital show has been going on forever.
Grey's Anatomy.
I'm
Wasn't that like what 90s or like 2000, like early 2000s?
Yeah, it's still going.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
it's still
sure.
going. It's still going,
and people still watch it. I think.
And it's like you just get a new set of nurses and doctors and bring them in and put them in the hospital, and then shit happens.
It's kind of like genius from a medical standpoint because like it's always evolving.
Yeah.
There's always another medical story. Obviously,
It's
COVID
true.
gave them 4 years of material. Like
For
it was
sure.
just like a bunch of stuff. But circling back to you a little bit, what stories are you trying to tell as a writer? Like what's your forte right now? What's kind of,
I think currently like messaging has been important to me. I like to try and find things that I'm passionate about, like kind of like that poaching story that I did. It's called The Price of Ivory, and it's just I love animals, and I think it's really cool. And I wanted to blend action with like sort of a message of like, hey, a lot of things that we know about and stuff like that could not be here in like the next 10 to 15 years. So I try to stay true to like what I enjoy and like issues that I care about, and put that in my writing. Like another thing is like I think right now we have like a really weird divide in this country. It's super like you feel it in the air. It doesn't really matter what's going on. But I think trying to write something that could make people see like, hey, like we're all in this together. You know what I mean?
some level of connection?
Yeah, just something like that where I'm not marginalizing any side of
Yeah.
anything. And that's a really hard thing to do.
Sure.
Because like at the same time, I don't know everything.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's really tough to like toe that line.
Right.
So things like that are things that like I try to
Does that hard on the creative side of things because like you're over here like brainstorming what you're passionate about and then you're like auditing it to see if like society would understand it?
Well, I mean, I think
degree?
that's like
everything?
That's anything with
Yeah.
somebody like writing something from like their brain and like what they feel about something and then putting it down to paper and then sending it out into the open.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good things are or how
The messaging, like you said.
somebody's always going to be like, this is not great, or
Yeah.
this is fantastic.
Offensive or whatever.
yeah, or offensive, or like, anything like that. So at that point, you just got to like learn to be like, hey,
Yeah.
just get it out there.
Yeah.
If people like it, great. If people don't like it, hey man, you tried.
Yeah.
You took a swing. So that's great. So
I think people can. I think a lot of times too is that like like you said, messaging is super important, but sometimes the messaging can be lazy to a
Yeah.
degree. To a degree,
yeah.
to where you're just saying a thought, and it's like, well, that's just an opinion, and a lot of people have opinions, but I think opinions with perspective are more easily digestible.
Yeah.
You know what
for
I'm saying?
sure.
Where it's like, okay, like I don't necessarily agree, or maybe I don't know if I agree, but at least I understand the perspective you're coming with.
Yeah.
So now I can actually try to digest this a little further than just the surface level, like
Yeah.
opinion or statement or
and
whatever the case is.
I think like a good trick that people do with that to get like, even if it's like a negative message,
Mm-hmm.
if you can justify a character's reason for those things, you might be more like, I see this guy
Yeah.
or this woman and like see why they're doing it.
Yeah.
I don't agree with it, but like I get like Hamilton.
Yeah.
Everyone like thinks Aaron Burr is like this villain.
Yeah.
And he totally killed Hamilton.
Yeah.
But like his whole like lead up is like,
Yeah.
I'm doing this because of this.
Right.
So it's like you're like,
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't do it, but I get.
But now
where
you know
this-
the why.
Yeah,
It's always like, do we know the why?
Whys are
behind this?
big, dude.
Yeah.
Whys are huge for.
It's like I stole all this so I could feed my family. Okay, now I know the why. I don't agree
Yeah.
with stealing.
Yeah.
But now my question is, why were you in that predicament to even do that? You know,
And
so like
another
it leads
thing
into something.
that folds back into it. If you don't have strong whys, everything falls flat.
Yeah.
Because if people are just doing things to just do things, that's chaos.
Yeah.
Like that's like anything. Like you're like, oh, what the hell are you doing that for?
yeah,
So
exactly. Purpose.
I think purpose is huge, especially for characters. If you give them a strong reason why, and you give them like a secret,
Yep.
that like they need to keep or something like that, then you understand why people are doing things.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
everybody has a motive, whether it's like real life or characters in a story.
Yeah, that makes
So-
sense. So for those creatives out there and future writers or aspiring writers, what's a couple pieces of advice that you would give them about getting started, right? Because a lot of people talk about writer's block. People like Seinfeld said there is no such thing as writer's block, right? It's just schedule the time to do your writing every day, every week, hour a day, whatever that format is.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be in regards to, like you said, a lot of it is just starting it, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like if you want to get fit, just show up to the gym, right? So it's like, so what would you say for people that are just starting out, right? And then second part of the question, for people that have started, are they just not, maybe they're not putting enough time in? From your experience right now, what would be some pieces of advice that you would give?
I would say for someone who wants to start it out, just start doing it. And it doesn't even have to be like, I think resources, people make excuses for resources.
Sure.
Even if like you're writing on paper,
it
works. Like it's writing.
It's writing.
So
your phone,
you have something. Yeah, exactly. Your phone, you can do it. I think being diligent and making sure and committing yourself to that time is perfect. Because even if it's like I have writer's block, I have things where I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know what I'm writing.
Yeah.
But even if you just get something out that sucks,
the
best thing is you can do is you can come back tomorrow. Mm-hmm. No one's gonna see it, so you can just edit it, strip it, be like, this sucked. But at least you got the reps in,
right?
So I would say just start, And for someone, what was the second question? For someone who's more experienced,
so somebody that has started, but they're not seeing the results they want to see, or they don't know where to take it. Where's something? Should they join writing clubs? Should they try to put more time into writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that now we live in an era where you could just like reach out to someone online and like there are writing communities. Right. There's like Reddit and stuff like that. There's Facebook groups.
Yeah.
There are people who are trying to do this. You just got to like reach out to them.
Yeah.
And people want to, I think for me, another thing when I was like getting into this, I was like, I don't know if I want to like, I never want to like give it to like my family because like they're going to be like, this is great or whatever. You want to find people who have that edge to them too, and that they want this as well. So handing it off to those folks and finding those people is great. I think finding a community is huge for it, and then just keep doing it, man. Because as long as like kind of like with the gym too, like when you start seeing results of like seeing your stuff get better, it compounds, and you're like, oh,
you get more motivated. You start prioritizing.
Once you start
more.
Seeing stuff, and then like also. There's also dips in times. Like I know for me personally, there's moments where I'm like, I haven't written in like a month or two.
Yeah.
And like, and then you try to get back into it. It's kind of like starting on a treadmill where you're like, the first 2 minutes kind of suck. But then once you kind of hit that rhythm and like that groove and you're sweating and you're doing the things, it's like, this is working. This is working. It's doing the thing that I needed to do. So I would say just keep going.
Just keep going. Do you think like a lot of people try to apply like the rule of 100 to things, or like, do it for 100. I know when you're trying to break a habit, they say 21 days. That's why they say the weekend of January 21st is when they call it Quitter's Weekend. That's when everyone kind of quits the resolutions that they put in place for themselves. So basically saying 3 weeks to break a habit. They say 100 hours or 100 tries to see if the thing is even for you. Do you think that applies for writing in the sense of if I wrote every single day for an hour for the next 100 days, would I be able to see if not saying I can guarantee create something great, but would that be enough time to see if I have what it takes to be great at some point? We think it's tough with writing.
I guess it all just comes down to the person.
Yeah.
It all comes down to like how much effort they're putting into it. Also, like what are they I think it really depends. Like if you are doing it as like a creative outlet and you're not like trying to
go somewhere, do something with it.
Yeah, then if you're just writing something and you want to just make a writing habit, it's great, perfectly fine. I think you said 100 days or 100 hours.
Well, it depends on the thing, right? So I think for writing, it'd be more like 100 days type thing. Like if you actually wrote for an hour, I guess it'd be the same thing. If you wrote for an hour a day for 100 days, basically just...
You would have something at the end that you could definitely be like, I think I like this. I think this could go somewhere. But the big thing is like once you stop with that project or something like that, or if like you've hit your 100-day mark, if it's not where it needs to be, go back and like keep working on it. So that's like a great thing too. I remember like I would write something and... it was like when I was like way younger, like 20. And you look at it and you go, this is great. Or if like this sucks, put it away, start something else, go outside, do anything. And then you come back to it and you're like, oh, I could see where I'm fixing this now. Having distance from something is great. So the 100 hours is awesome. Do all that stuff. Also give yourself some time to be like, let me get away from this project. Because you can get tunnel vision on things. And then, but also another thing at the same time, like don't ever like, if you're passionate about something, don't ever stop it. don't get discouraged with it because at the end of the day, like it is just you and like a piece of paper.
Sure.
Nobody's like over your shoulder being like, "Oh, this sucks." You do that to yourself enough.
Yeah, imposter syndrome. To yourself,
I do that all the time when I'm writing something. Like, this is terrible. This is terrible. It's terrible. Terrible. And then but then you have to like remind yourself like there's nobody here right now doing this, looking at you doing it. So
why not?
Yeah, just keep going.
Well, that's why it's tough because writing, it's one of those things that, again, you're self-auditing. You have to kind of keep yourself accountable as well. But like you said, kind of persevere through that imposter syndrome and stuff. So one last question for you. What's one piece of advice that you'd give yourself today that you wish you had this time last year?
Oh, man. This time last year?
Yeah. So basically, if you knew this piece of advice a year ago, it would have helped you in 2024. But now you'll be able to leverage, use that piece of advice this year.
I think taking a page out of my own advice I just said was just don't procrastinate.
Okay.
Because there are times where like, and life gets in the way of things where you're like, oh, we have to go do this, or we have work and all that stuff. If you can still find time to carve out just a piece for yourself, even if it is just an hour a day, you can, you'll see that exponentially different a year from now. So I think there was times last year where I would work on something or write it, and then maybe I wasn't as diligent as I was when, as opposed to like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I still wrote, but it wasn't as much as I wanted or liked to. Yeah. So I think Austin 2024, get off your ass and do something. So
be a little bit more consistent.
Yeah, be a little bit more
disciplined with your own passion. It's your passion anyway,
exactly.
So be disciplined with it. You know
exactly.
what I'm saying?
And nobody's gonna work for something more for you than you.
Yeah.
So
well, I think that's a good thing to end on, and I think it's I think that's the kind of enlightening thing about having a full-time job and making sure that you're up to par with that job and putting your best foot forward. But then when you come home, so to speak, and work on your passions, it kind of goes to the back burner. So it's like almost keep that same energy as they
There's
say.
So many reasons. You'll always find 1,000 reasons to be like, oh, I can just do it tomorrow. And like that's anything. You could apply that to anything. Sure. Whether it's like, writing a proposal for, something on the side that you're doing or going to the gym. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
You could be like, but tomorrow's there. Sometimes tomorrow's not there.
Exactly.
So not trying to be like deep or anything, but like it's the truth. So
yeah, why not start now? You know what I'm saying? So
it's true.
No, it sounds really good, man. I appreciate you again taking the time to stop by.
This was awesome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll have you on again and we'll see what the progress is and how far that script has come along.
For sure. And,
yeah. Maybe have a show on TV. I don't know.
Maybe we'll see. One day. Let's hope, dude. Well,
but no, I appreciate it, man. And man, I'm excited to see where you take the writing. And I think that, you're obviously the production world, the writing world is a little bit different, but it's still kind of under the umbrella of being a creative and, kind of putting yourself out there, and you're still like in the same rooms that writers, it's kind of the same room, whether you're a producer or a writer, right? It's just like different tasks. So I think that, just for you, don't be discouraged if you're not spending all your time doing the thing that you're passionate about, because I do think that there's a lot of crossover and,
absolutely.
I think, you'll be able to kind of compound on both sides of things, and
you
never know where the opportunities are going to come from, and so the more you can sharpen your tools and add to your toolbox, I think that's just going to help you. So
I appreciate it.
I'm excited for it, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you, man. It's been awesome to be on here with you. It's really cool. I've known Ben for a couple months now, and he asked me, and I was like, sure, I'll do it.
I was like, come on.
But this was awesome, and it's cool to be in the chair. It's also very different. I'm never like in the chair. I'm always behind the stuff. So
hey,
really cool.
Welcome to my world. I like to be in the hiding and low key, but it's fun to have these conversations.
Yeah, man. This was a blast. I loved it.
Absolutely, man.
Thanks,
well,
man.
Hope you guys took something from it. Leave a comment. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.